Alright, so something that I want to try to do today is make some music that is outside of my comfort zone. Think of making something that's like drum and bass, maybe like liquid D&B, because that's something I'm into. But let's see where the direction takes us. And yeah, I'm gonna be starting off at 180 as the tempo. I think this is what I would prefer for drum and bass. And let's see what we can do with that. Personally, for me, I like to write my music in F major. So I'm gonna try to use Vital, which is a really nice synthesizer that I like to use. So something I'm thinking of doing already is adding a filter into it. I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. Alright, so I found this really nice pad which alternates between different pitches. So let's see what we can do with it. It almost sounds like it doesn't want to work together, but it's mostly because we're getting a tritone, but I'm remaining hopeful. So I'm sensing that we're having too much reverb, or sorry, I think we're having too much of an attack from our secondary pad. So I'm gonna adjust that by EQing some of the attack off, and I think that should work. Okay, so here what I'm thinking of doing is, again, either deriving myself to go to the orchestral side and modifying those sounds, or trying to find something electronic and heavier and stackable into a chord. I want to make such a big chord that it actually fills up the frequency range all the way from bass side to mids, and just let that really carry forward this melody that we have. Okay, perfect. It took me a while to find it, but I finally got the sound I'm looking for. So an issue I used to have back then when I made music is every single time I hit a bar, I would hate to see it be empty, and I would immediately fill it with notes. And something that I've realized is, if you want to have a sound that is more intimate, is by just kind of leaving some spaces to kind of let the listener to kind of, breathe and kind of think about where the next chords or notes are going to hit. But not here. Here we're making electronic music. We want things to be more, how do I say this? I guess high intensity, but at the same time I do want to make it have some ethereal notation to it, where it still feels like you can discern different layers of it, but still have enough contents to go through. It's not filling in the range I want, so I'll move it up an octave. Okay, how about if I remove this and just made this the thing? Okay. You see, that's something else that I want to show, is that you're going to have some ideas that just don't stick as well as you want them to. And that's okay. You should be adaptable enough where you could just, on the slide, just make a completely different sound. And I think that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to put this to the side, and I'm going to work on this sound specifically. This has a lot of potential behind it, so I'm gonna put some reverb into it because it desperately needs that. Reverb that I always like using, and don't clown me on this. Honestly, I think a lot of people don't use the stock effects that come with their DAW enough. if you can get yourself just a few bonus points, and I swear I feel like your life can change for the better, and so is your composition. So I'm putting in some reverb. I'm gonna remove whatever reverb this has. Variation, maybe a little more. Attack, that one should be quicker. That's exactly how I want it to sound. I want it to sound like an actual wash, though not loud enough. So that's why I like writing in F major. There's this undertone where it feels like it's setting in between wanting to be a lighter sound, but also having that dark tones to it. And you can just really play around with it. Where do I want to go from here? There. Surprising. I'm not gonna lie. I was not, I was not too happy with how it started at first, but after some tweaking, I actually really like how that melody ended. And I'm very certain on a loop this would sound great. Though that's another thing I want to talk about is don't try to make loops, but try to make your song actually move. You don't want it to kind of sound like the same thing after you've skipped a minute forward, because in that end you're just gonna have something that sounds very static and not really bouncy. So so here's my crazy plan, right? I'm gonna put an orchestral ensemble to replace the first pad that I made. The way I'm gonna do that is by using Spitfire Labs and using the ensemble with no reverb. And then I'm gonna make everything my own by simply just adding the effects that I want in it. And yeah, hoping for the best. I mean, I know it works, but it doesn't want to cooperate with me. Pattern number 4. Have reverb on it, of course. Cathedral, that's what I like. Effects are on it. Filter. Alright, so we have that going for us. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all this and I'd put a synthetic pad right under it. We're going to have the exact same sound, exact same melody, playing in a different octave with different instrumentation. Yep, we have a winner. So take all this melody, F5, move that down to F4. Let's hear how these sound. So when we add our counter melody, I like how it's still clear. You can still hear it, no matter what. And swells is what I'm looking for. And all right, so we have a full track. So let me just give you a very quick rundown of what everything is. First pattern over here is the first melody that we came up with, which is actually a synth that is taken from Spitfire Labs, the 9th edition, which is then modified and modulated through the mixer over here. Another thing that we've used also is the Vital synth engine that allows you to basically create your own sounds and that sort of thing. This is one of my presets. And after that, we have a counter melody over here that then becomes the main melody towards the second half. Obviously, and you cannot have drum and bass without drums and bass. So putting that all together, I came up with a structure. Somewhere within the second half, I took this entire counter melody and I arpeggiated it, giving me this amazing cluster of notations. And with that, I just played around with some spacing over here to kind of add some dramatic effects. And then towards the end, it comes off to a brief cutoff. And we have this nice ensemble that plays while the drums swap in and out between two different variations that I have. And then it cuts off to a nice reverb outro. So yeah, let's take a listen to how this entire thing sounds. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed it.